The 6th of June, 1944. The world changes as Allied troops land on the beaches of Normandy. D-Day marks the beginning of the liberation of continental Europe from Nazi occupation. Across France, hope returns. But with that hope comes new danger. As Allied planes roar overhead and soldiers fight their way inland, the French resistance strikes behind enemy lines, blowing up bridges, derailing trains, blocking roads. German supply lines collapse, and panic spreads through their ranks. In the quiet village of Oradour-sur-Glane, the people know of the landings. They hear the distant thunder of war, yet daily life continues. Then, on the 10th of June 1944, just 4 days after D-Day, the sound of engines breaks the calm. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich arrives, bringing murder and terror. In the evening, 642 villages are dead, 240 women, 205 children, and 197 men, and Oradour is burned to the ground. However, this crime will not remain unpunished. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, stationed in southern France, was ordered to move north in the country to reinforce the front, as the chaos in the countryside grew and Hitler's generals feared an uprising in France. But instead of heading directly to Normandy, it spent days conducting brutal operations in the interior. Its task was to restore order and terrorize civilians into obedience. Resistance fighters were hunted down, and civilians suspected of helping them were tortured and shot. Towns were looted and burned. The division had become infamous for cruelty. Their movement was slow, deliberate, and bloody. Their superiors wanted to show that any village that supported the resistance would pay with blood. The 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich was not just a military unit. It was an instrument of terror. Many of its officers had been indoctrinated with Nazi ideology from their teenage years. The division's record in Eastern Europe had already been marked by massacres in tens of villages and towns, a tactic similar to that which they would follow in France in 1944. On the 8th of June 1944, 2 days after the Allied landing, the German army commander-in-chief for the West, Generalfeldmarschall Gerd von Rundstedt, issued orders to crush resistance with swift and ruthless initiative, and expressed the expectation that the major operation against the gangs in southern France, as he called the resistance fighters, would be carried out with the greatest severity and without leniency. On the 9th of June 1944, soldiers from the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich hanged 99 men in the town of Toul in retaliation for a resistance attack. That same day, SS Sturmbannführer Adolf Diekmann received news that his friend and also a member of the SS, Helmut Kämpfer, had been captured by resistance fighters. According to one report, Kämpfer was burnt alive in a stolen German ambulance. Diekmann, enraged and seeking revenge, ordered his men to find and punish those responsible. Some believed he had intended to attack Oradour-sur-Glane, where resistance activity had been reported, but instead his convoy turned toward the wrong village, Oradour-sur-Glane. On the 10th of June, about 200 SS soldiers from the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich entered Oradour-sur-Glane. They sealed the roads and forced the population of over 640 people into the town square to have their identity papers examined. The men were separated from the women and children. The women and children were locked in the church, and the village was looted. Though an SS officer accused the men of the village of hiding weapons, no such weapons were found, but the killings began anyway. Men of the village were divided into small groups and led to 6 barns and sheds, where machine guns were already in place. Once inside, SS soldiers shot into their legs to cripple them. Then they poured petrol over the wounded and set the barns on fire. Those who tried to escape were shot again. One survivor described lying under the bodies of his neighbors, pretending to be dead, while flames consumed the building. The screams of burning men rose above the flames. 6 men survived. They heard the screams, the gunfire, the crackling flames. Their testimony would later prove the crime in the investigations after the war. One boy, Roger Godfin, managed to escape by slipping through the window during the chaos. He had not run very far before he was shot at. He dropped to the ground and played dead. A German soldier kicked his body, but the young boy did not move. As soon as it was safe, he was up and running again. He was wounded but survived. On the other side, his entire family was killed in the massacre. During this time, while the men were burning to death in the barns, women and children were herded into the village church. The soldiers placed explosives beside it. When they were ignited, women and children tried to escape through the doors and windows, only to be met with machine gun fire. Smoke, fire, and chaos followed. Women cried out, children screamed, mothers tried to shield their babies. When some tried to escape, they were cut down with machine gun fire. Others suffocated in the thick smoke. The church's roof collapsed in flames. One adult woman, Marguerite Roufange, escaped. Wounded by 5 bullets, she climbed through a sacristy window and hid under pea bushes and remained there until nightfall. Of those in the church, she was the only one who survived and spent over a year recovering from her injuries. Once the killings were done, the SS looted the homes. They stole valuables, food, and anything useful. Then they burned the entire village to the ground. Even the animals were shot. Dogs, horses, rabbits, none were spared. In the evening, the soldiers left behind only ruins, ash, and silence. After the massacre, which had lasted a few hours, an entire community was erased. This atrocity was similar to another crime, which took place exactly 2 years earlier on the 10th of June, 1942, when German soldiers erased the village of Lidice in the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Both of these places became a symbol of Nazi crimes. There was no resistance cell in Oradour-sur-Glane, and no ambush had been launched from its streets. The citizens of this small village were non-combatants. They were shopkeepers, farmers, and children. The massacre was not a response to a threat. It was a message which said, "This is what happens to anyone who will only think about resisting Nazi rule." The German command later claimed the villagers had died in battle or from an accidental explosion. However, these were lies, and the evidence was overwhelming. When Allied forces arrived in August, they found the ruins untouched, and investigators and journalists photographed everything. A few survivors gave statements. The world saw what had happened. A team of war photographers documented every inch of the devastation, and what they captured was not a battlefield. It was a crime scene. Though efforts to punish the killers were slow and incomplete, justice or revenge eventually caught up with at least some of the perpetrators. While on the 1st of July 1944, the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich reported having 17,283 officers and men. 2 months later, on the 13th of September, that number had fallen to 12,357, as thousands were killed on the battlefield. Adolf Diekmann, who commanded the battalion responsible for the Oradour-sur-Glane massacre on the 10th of June 1944, was among them. He was killed in Normandy just weeks after the atrocity. His superior, SS Gruppenführer Heinz Lammerding, was sentenced to death in absentia by a French court in 1953, but West Germany refused to extradite him. He died a free man in 1971. That same year, 21 men, 7 Germans, and 14 ethnic Germans from French region of Alsace were put on trial in Bordeaux. Almost all Alsatians on trial had been forced to serve in the SS after their region was annexed by Germany. Some were teenagers at the time. The court sentenced 2 of the men to death and others to prison. But political pressure in Alsace led to a general amnesty. Within 5 years, they were all free. In Oradour, survivors felt betrayed. In their view, the killers of their relatives had walked away. The massacre of Oradour-sur-Glane became a symbol of Nazi barbarism. The ruins were left untouched on purpose. French president and wartime leader of French resistance, Charles de Gaulle, declared the village a national memorial. Its burnt-out homes and untouched rusted cars remain untouched as they were in 1944 to this day. Grass grows through the cracks. Today, visitors can see scorched children's toys, burnt cutlery, and other things of the former citizens turned to ash. Survivors, like Marguerite Ruffranche, never forgot the crime, but they were only 7 people. On the 10th of June, 1944, 197 men, 240 women, and 205 children were murdered. The horror of Oradour-sur-Glane was not caused by chaos or panic. It was done with planning, discipline, and intent. It showed what happens when hatred is law, when obedience replaces conscience, and when people lose their humanity. 642 people died in a few hours, burned, shot, or suffocated. Among them were infants and the elderly. Their village was not just destroyed, it was burned to the ground. But the memory remains. Oradour-sur-Glane stands as a reminder. A village killed in a single day. A warning written in stone and ash. A truth that must never be forgotten. Before we end today's story, take a look at worldhistory.tv, your special destination for true history lovers. Discover exclusive documentaries and incredible stories you won't find anywhere else. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.